Excellent. Welcome everyone from certainly across Australia and New Zealand, and we have another number of representatives from other regions. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land from which we all meet today, from around those regions, and pay my respect to elders past, present, and emerging. So today in this session, this is the first first episode of really a Smart Cities in Action and community resilience. And this is obviously, this is the session on disaster resilience. And I know from Michael in our pre-chat that it's really timely. As always, there's always something happening around the world, and especially in our region at this point. So today there's myself hosting. I'm head of local government engagement across Australia and New Zealand for Amazon Web Services, and partnering today with Robin Francis, who's Global Engagement Coordinator at Smart Cities Council, and we work in partnership on a number of initiatives, including this. And I'm really grateful and pleased to have the support for this session, and throughout this really this engagement on Smart Cities in Action from Christchurch City Council, LGAQ, Local Government Association Queensland, and ALGAM, Association of Local Government Information Managers in New Zealand. So today's agenda is going to be quick fire. I really appreciate everyone's time. We had over 200 registrations, and I'm sure we'll get up near that 100 mark today. So thank you for your valuable time. I hope you learn and take the opportunity to enter some questions in the chat. So just quickly kind of going over the agenda, revising the agenda, Smart Cities, or Smart Christchurch, I should say, with Michael. He's going to take us through their earthquake monitoring network. Then we'll have Matt taking us through some innovation around flood detection. And I know Matt and LGAQ are up for some awards on that project. And then lastly, my colleague, Ashley Tan, will take you through how AWS is helping public sector organizations and their communities to prepare and respond to disasters in a number of regions. So as I say, quick fire, 12 minutes each. Then we'll have a time for some questions to the panel, but please use the chat to raise those, and we'll follow up after the webinar. And I know these fine people here who are presenting will commit to answering those questions where they can afterwards. The session is being recorded, and we'll follow up with emails to all registrants. So just one slide on Amazon Web Services, in case certainly those viewers who don't know who we are, what we do. In summary, we are the world's, that one's gone forward, thanks Robin, the world's most comprehensive and broadly adopted cloud platform. And in Australia and New Zealand, public sector customers across government, education, not-for-profit, healthcare are using AWS to innovate, evolve, and solve citizens' challenges like disaster resilience. So really the range of products and services from analytics to databases, mobile services, and serverless computing. AWS can help you drive cost savings, speed up time to market, and increase your agility and innovation. Thanks, Robin. So without further ado, it's really over to the stars of the show, really, and this is such an important topic. So I'll hand over to Michael from Christchurch City Council. Thanks, Michael.
Kia ora from New Zealand. Can you guys hear me okay? And can you see the presentation? Wonderful. Let's kick into it. So I am the Smart Christchurch Manager, and Christchurch, for those who don't know much about it, is the second largest city in New Zealand. So as Anthony said, I'll give you a quick overview of our recently adopted strategy, and then we'll talk about the earthquake monitoring network Sentinel. So first of all, Christchurch, the city's vision that we work to is about making sure that the city is a city of opportunity for all, open to new ideas, new people, new ways of doing things, an innovative place where anything is possible. In terms of our program, we're part of the Christchurch City Council, and I often describe we're like an R&D department for the council. So the purpose is to trial technology and approaches that accelerate our vision of becoming a city of opportunity for all, and to promote Christchurch as an exemplar, open, connected city, making life better for our citizens, but also sharing with other cities, both in New Zealand and further afield. In terms of our journey, the program itself has been going for 7 years, and to be honest, initially it was sort of tech first, IoT up a pole, trying to think about how we could find a use case. And as the program's matured over the years, it's certainly become a more people-centered focus for us. Collaboration is increasingly important, both with, as you say, other cities, but tertiary education companies, utility owners, other regional partners. Co-design, again, as we mature, we increasingly try to involve our key stakeholders and our customers from the earliest possible points to make sure we're on the right track and that we stay on track. And then, as I mentioned, replication, and Sentinel is a good example of this. I'll give you an overview, but we're really excited to see Wellington set up a similar system just last year. Just quickly, in terms of this slide here, it's pretty busy, but I'll focus on the community outcomes. When we look at new projects, we're thinking about resilient communities, number one. Christchurch has had a very challenging last 12 years, and the importance of resilience has really come out through those 12 years. Livable city is extremely important, whether that's for pedestrians, the way we get around, healthy air, healthy water supply. Moving on, healthy environment by extension. We're very aware that over the past 150 years of human settlement, our rivers, our air and nature has suffered. So we're trying to reverse some of the aspects of that, and in turn, also helping our resilience. Lastly, prosperous economy, then that's really about supporting local innovators and helping them on their journey and making sure that the things we're doing are making Christchurch a more attractive place to invest in and study in. Last slide here is just about, in terms of our process, as I said, we go through typically exploring, ideation, trial and implementation. And as I said earlier, as the program has matured, we've very much focused on engaging the right people at the right time and making sure they're partners all the way through. And also, you don't have to be the one necessarily that's delivering things yourself. Often you could be the function that's bringing creative people together to come up with amazing solutions. But as you can see there, we've got a lot on the go. So I'm really happy for you to contact us after this, talk about any of those that might be of more interest. So onwards to Sentinel, Earthquake Monitoring Network. So to set the scene, as I said, we've had a challenging 12 or 13 years, and the Canterbury earthquakes really, I suppose, was a seminal kind of event for us in 2011. One of the key things we found, that shows the CBD of Christchurch there, we only had 4 seismic sensors, for quite a large area. And what we found with the sensors we did have, there was a lot of variable shaking. And the impact of those big events varied a lot across the city, depending on soil type, building type, location of the epicenter. So from there, we invested in bulking up the amount of sensors we had in the central business district. And as you can see there from an actual example back in 2018, by having that expanded network, we really understood that it was very variable shaking, but also as we had more sensors, we could apply more intelligence in the immediate event, after the immediate event. So from there, we invested on 150 different earthquake monitoring sensors. And as you can see from the map there, they're right across the region. Unsurprisingly, they're focused on our CBD, but we've gone out to the peninsula and rural areas as well to give us as much information and density of sensors as possible. And when we went to install these sensors, we thought, okay, we need power and need comms. How can we be smart about where we put these sensors? So we've put them in traffic control boxes, we've put them in pump stations, we've put them in our libraries, our pools, and our buildings. So as well as making it cheaper and more affordable, it also allowed us to give us a really good spread, because unsurprisingly, our asset base is right over the whole territory. And we don't know where earthquakes are going to strike at any point, so we need to have a really good coverage right across the territory. In terms of some of the learning since then, I've put a couple of examples from 2019. Now, these are relatively small events, but noticeable. And what we found through them, there was obviously a lot of variation in shaking, depending on a whole range of things. So as I said, when we look at our building stock, there's a couple hundred of them. We think about what building standard they're built to. We think what ground conditions they're on, and then we can take all the intel from the sensors to work out what's happened to that building after shaking. So going forward to this slide, this is an actual example of something that happened last Friday. So we had a cluster of quakes in the morning. It started with a magnitude 4 at 2 o'clock. We had a 3.6 at 7:30 when people were just making their breakfast, and that was followed by a 4.4. Now, as you can see from the middle screenshot there, we can see exactly where the epicenter is, but also we can see across the city what the shaking patterns were pretty much immediately. So I got that email about 2 or 3 minutes as I was drinking my coffee and wondering what had just happened. And then if you go to the far right of the slide, this is where it gets more technical, but at the top of that, you can see there's a very simple message to the building warden and to me by extension, to say that the building has experienced shaking, but it should be safe for BAU. Now, if there was a more serious earthquake, or if it was closer, or for whatever reason it had breached the structural integrity, then we'd relay that seriousness. So our building wardens get these messages within 2 to 3 minutes of the event, compared to previously where potentially we have to wait months before we could get a structural engineer. We can know within 2 or 3 minutes if it's safe to, our buildings are safe to be in. And the more technical kind of graph there actually shows the cumulative stress on that building. So that broad line at the top there is its profile in terms of resilience to ground shaking, both vertically and horizontally. And it builds up the cumulative stress patterns that are, that can happen over a number of years. So we know from the quakes on Friday, for example, we had 3 buildings that cumulatively actually it signaled that we need to have a good look at them. So instantly we can get an engineer, get out to those buildings, worst case scenario, close them. Best case scenario, we can validate there's not major issues and keep them open. And as I said previously, in terms of some of the outcomes that we've got, I mean, if we throw our mind back to 2011 when we closed our central business district, we lost $4 million. The economy lost $4 million every day, and that lasted for about a year. Somewhere like Wellington is expected to lose about $8 million if the CBD is closed. If we had a major event today, we could know exactly which buildings were safe, which part of the city was safe, and we could be tactical in terms of how we close off the CBD, and as such, keep businesses going, keep the money flow, keep people safe. Civil defence, we share this info with them, so instantly like they can put that information over assets such as buildings, but also bridges, roads, and other critical infrastructures. They can really target their response after a main event. This service, Sentinel, is offered to all residents and building owners, so they can subscribe to this without having to invest in hardware themselves or be seismic experts. So this is really good for buildings that have been rebuilt and couldn't afford to actually put their own sensors in. And lastly, as I said, it's scalable to the whole New Zealand. Now, unfortunately, we have a massive risk across the whole country, right from the top to the bottom. And as Christchurch has found out, but other areas are finding out. And Hawke's Bay, unfortunately, was hit by a 5.9 this morning. So for New Zealand, it's a very real threat. And the whole ring of fire globally, we think technology like this can keep people safe. So again, always happy to talk to anyone who's interested in learning more. Wellington, as I said, put 100 of these sensors in the CBD. Well, Wellington has a long known earthquake risk, and they had, I think, a 7.8 in 1856, which inundated the city with a tsunami. So it's a very real thing that they deal with. So they've invested in their own network to tell them what's happening after a major event. So just to wrap up before I hand over to Matt, of the lessons learned, doing an iterative scale up is really important in smart cities, full stop. You don't have to start with 150 sensors, start with 4, start with 10, build your way up as you validate the efficacy of the technology or the approach. Use infrastructure, whether that's power supply, shelter, or fiber, to put out networks like these, because it'll make it a lot cheaper and it'll give the sensor a lot longer life too. someone needs to fund these trials to actually, get momentum. And as we said, the Smart Christchurch program was the initial funder of that, but then we worked very closely with our facilities team to take over the BAU running of the network, which happened about a year and a half. And we're talking to Transport, we're talking to Ministry of Education and Civil Defence to have this as a regional resource that we can then co-invest in and share the load of the cost longer term too. And then lastly, and this is close to my heart, you have to work and collaborate with your vendors and your co-creators effectively on making sure you're clear on the requirements and then working iteratively in a genuine partnership to build this. So, I mean, as well as having this great network for Christchurch and keeping, people safe, we've also supported the company's journey. And when we go back to prosperous economy, if local companies are having reference companies or customers like ourselves, it gives them a platform and a springboard to take their products to the world. So on that note, I will stop sharing and pass over to Matt. Thanks very much for the chance to talk today. Got my email address there. You can reach out via LinkedIn or you can email the team directly. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael. That was really good. And thank you, Anthony and AWS and also Smart Cities Council for inviting the LGAQ to speak today. What I want to speak to you guys about, we kind of spoke about a little bit at the start, but we have a really boring and unsexy name for it. We call it the Flood Detection Project, and that's because it's in a pilot stage. So if anyone has a great idea for this project, please let us know. But a little bit about the LGAQ, we're a peak body for all Queensland councils. So there's 77 Queensland councils. We have 100% membership rate. We're really proud of that. And as you probably know, the landscape of Queensland varies greatly. We've got metro councils, we've got regional councils, we've got Indigenous councils, we've got everything in between. And they all have different problems. And we recently set up an innovation lab, which I'll show you in a second. But before I just jump into that, this is the scale of the problem that we see in some of these councils. So this just looks like a beautiful sunset somewhere you just want to be on a balcony and just overlook it as the water moves. But there's actually a road under here. And that really speaks to the significance of the problem that's out in some of these regions. And this is taken in Carpentaria Shire Council, which I'll show you in a second. For now, this is the Innovation Lab. We call it the LGAQ Lab. And we've set this up for members to come in, bring us their problems, whatever their problem is, and they can define that alongside us and have us either pair with an industry partner or deliver something internally as well. So that's the showroom. This is the back room where people can sort of come and chill out and sort of talk about their problems or kick our ass in Street Fighter. There's some hot desks, some little meeting room functionalities and so forth. So through that, Carpentaria Shire Council brought us a problem and they came to us and they just simply said, can we get FTP access to store some flood images? And this is the kind of problem that we get given from councils. We don't hate it, but we know that there's a little bit more that we can get from here. This just came from an electrician as well, which speaks to how little red tape there is out there in the regions. Anyone can come to us with a problem. So we asked, sure, what do you want to do that? And he was saying basically the satellite cameras that they have in the field, they keep failing. They're really poor quality, they're aging. So they want to store some images on a server and stand up their own camera network and display those images on their website. But we kind of heard two different things from this. We heard something kept failing, so there's an opportunity to improve here, and that really they wanted to display something on their website. It wasn't actually about storing stuff on an FTP server. But you know what? He wanted it on the FTP server. So, if you want to dig around and look for images and determine if they're flooded manually or not, be our guest. We did that. But then we went a step further and we thought we could just upload these images onto the website, but we could also map out these high-risk flood locations and have the end user, so any residents, or even if you're not a resident of Carpentaria Shire Council, can go on their website and see this. You can click on any of these points and it'll load up the most recent image. So what you see there is one of the aging satellite cameras. It's got all this garbage overlay and stuff like that. And I'll show you the alternative in a second. But we've got some really good feedback from that in the field. This is the CEO. He loved it because the residents loved it. They said, congratulations on the new Carpentaria flood map feature on their website. It's far better than what was previously available, which, like I said, was absolute garbage. But really, there's a bigger problem that sits within this. And that's that if they drive from 33 Hague Street, which is the head office, prime downtown Normanton, which is in Carpentaria, they want to drive out to one of these locations to do a manual assessment on the road because they can't really determine if something's flooded or not. They need to drive 3 hours, and that's just one way. But then if it's flooded, they need to take detours, and that can be 5 hours. So when they do these manual inspections, they actually send 2 people out. So that's 2 council resources that are sitting more than 1 business day in traffic or on the road just to go down and see if something's flooded or not. So we kind of asked ourselves, how can we make this even better? And the opportunity that we saw here was to build an AI model that can automatically detect flooding over roads. So they don't need to jump into the FTP server and dig around and find the newest image and then go, is that flooded? Yes or no? And there's no variance over the personal interpretation of that. But they also don't need to drive out and do the assessment themselves. This is what the electrician said, Tom. He said, flood cameras are a critical disaster communication tool, and the AI will help them greatly assist in increasing the safety of road users and the efficiency of council operations. So what's really important there is the safety of road users, but it's also the safety of council officers, because they don't need to go in these really high risk areas. But like I said, it's every time they do a check on just one location, it's returning a whole business day of productivity to their bottom line. So the opportunities we saw in doing this was to reduce travel time, which I spoke about already, improve the communication. So you saw that flood map a little bit, but also through introducing automations, we can improve the communication as well. So I'll speak a little bit about that in a second, and also improving the camera reliability, which I'll speak to a little bit in a second. So to do this, normally whole big teams get set up to deliver AI projects, but the LGAQ is pretty small. We've only got 90 people as a whole and only 20 people in the digital team. So we just sort of handpicked a couple of people. So we've got Freddie Lovano, who's the tech lead. He's on the call today as well. Shout out Freddie, loves Amazon. And then we've also got Josip and Luton. Josip is a developer and Luton is an analytics specialist, but he's got some background in machine learning and AI. So super lean team, and we've been able to deliver it just with how lean this is. So we're super proud of that, and we're super proud of being able to give these internal resources that, you know, their BAU realms they're very satisfied with, but that this helps keep them passionate because they can apply their skills outside of those BAU silos. So the solution that we did, we took all these publicly available flooded images, whether they're flooded or not, and we trained an AI using them. So through all of those that we only grabbed initially around 500 images, which is actually quite low. What we're sitting at on these training models now is around about 10,000, and that continues to grow the longer these cameras are in the field. But just with those 500 images, we were able to build a model that can positively detect flooding over roads using those images with 98.6% accuracy. So super proud of that. These are the cameras that are out there. So what we heard from the council is that the satellite cameras are crap. And we also heard that they've got a really low budget and they're not able to bring in external companies to set up camera networks. So through the LGAQ lab, we worked with Telstra, who's one of our partners, and one of their partners to get these cameras in the network. What we heard was that to install a single camera in the field is around about $20,000. These cameras here are $2,200. They're super clear, 4K, they use 100% green energy. And what that allows us to do is deliver a cost benefit for councils, so 18,000 bucks every single time. And these cameras, when they pay $20,000, there's no AI component. It's just literally a camera in the field. And so this uses 100% green energy, includes a solar panel, and that allows us to make some really clear detections of AI. This is an example of one of the cameras that are out there in Jenny Lind. So really wide view, super clear. This is actually scaled down to 50% of the resolution because that's how clear these are. And so you'll notice that it's a straight line, but we take a really wide view because flooding can come from anywhere and roads can be any different shape and size. They could be snaky, they could be straight. When the water comes through and the heavy rain comes through, this is during the rain. So again, we can positively detect flooding because it's super clear. This is after the rain's gone. Obviously, it's devastating how much flooding's there. It blows my mind still. You know, I was just out there last week and saw how dry it is out there. It looks like a totally different road. This is in another location, Corduroy. So again, when the water starts coming up, people come and they have a little beach day. which is really nice for them. But then once the flooding fully comes, that's what it looks like again. And that's again the same picture that I opened with today. These cameras also handle quite well in low light, and we've built the AI model to detect flooding in as little light as possible. And we're working on 24/7 around this. But this is 7:45 at night. We're still seeing positive detection of flooding there. And then half an hour later at 8:15 at night, you can barely tell that there's a road there, but it's still detecting a positive detection of flooding over roads. Right now, we have these cameras and the AI detecting 6 different locations. It's actually 8 because we're working on those 2 satellites, but we're going to continue with these 6 here. And then those 2 satellite cameras are unreliable, so they're going in the bin. These are the email notifications that they get sent. So once the image is processed and it determines if there's flooding over the road, then the council officer will receive an email, and that'll tell them 3 things. It'll tell them the location and the time that the flooding was detected. It'll also tell them the confidence rate of the detection. So any positive detection over 80%, they'll receive this email notification. And then it'll also send them the image. So that's all on one email. Similarly, once it's no longer flooded and it hits that 80% confidence rate that it's no longer flooded, then they'll receive the same thing again, just so they know that that's all good in that spot. Councils tell us that there's 8 different things that they want the projects that we deliver to, to have, to 8 different aspects. And we think this has 6 of them. So we're really proud of that. There's a lot of potential automations. We just talked about the email one, which was part of the pilot, but we can also extend this to SMS notifications to council officers and then the public. We can also do things like automatically upload the flooded image to council's website or a disaster dashboard, and then similarly remove that once it's no longer flooded. We can also build Facebook chatbots that notify those people in the public. There's a lot of people that are crazy about flooded roads out there, and that's their passion and their hobby to share those images. So we can build a chatbot to do that. We can also update road closure boards, and we can also feed other automations to internal council systems. So at a really high level about how this works, basically an image is taken every 15 minutes and then it's uploaded to the cloud, runs the AI processing on that, and then triggers the automation as that determination is done. Won't go into too much information about this, about the security side of things, but we did do some consultation with AWS to utilize their shared responsibility model, and that was really beneficial for us as well. Happy to go into this in a little more detail offline though. In terms of cost and time, to wrap this up, this currently costs less than 1 lunch per week. I had McDonald's this morning, but if I had to go without my McDonald's to fund one of these a week, I would go without that. But the fries are delicious. This is more important though. In terms of deployment time, we can deploy one of these AI models on a camera that we supply, that $2,000 camera, within 1 day. And then if we do it on a satellite camera, it takes 3 days work, which still isn't the end of the world, but we need to also factor in those overlays and how it's not really ideally set up. When we move into a product phase, we ask ourselves, how can we make this even better? Proof of concept, we did the research, we designed and trained the AI, we deployed the cameras, we created the email notifications. When we move into a product phase, so we're working with 5 different councils at the moment. We started with Carpentaria, now we're working with Western Downs, Kawanyama, Diamantina, and Wujal. In a product phase, we're looking at nighttime identification. We're looking at camera downtime notifications, which we actually delivered because we had a bit extra time. So they're active. Additional website automations, which I talked about before, and the SMS and messenger notifications as well. Now, I know there's probably a bunch of questions when this gets supplied around. There's 3 that I've put there. Why is it so cheap? Are the cameras recording everything? And what are the privacy concerns? And some other ones there. So I won't answer them now, but if anyone has any questions, happy to take them. Otherwise, I'm going to stop the sharing here and kick on to Ash.
It's great to be here with you, colleagues in Australia. I'm Ash. I'm from the Social Responsibility and Impact team in AWS. We cover disaster response as one of 5 key pillars. Can I just check and ensure my screen is showing? Right. So just a quick intro to who we are. We really just focus on applying our technology expertise to drive positive social impact outcomes. We're here to talk about disasters, but just to level set, we also cover 4 other pillars: public health, sustainability, human rights, and open data. And clearly all of these are intertwined because a lot of disasters that we see are induced by climate change, which brings into play of sustainability, and that in turn leads to a lot of public health challenges in the wake of a disaster, particularly for low-lying islands and those who are disproportionately affected. And that brings in the human rights angle as well. How we work. We really work across 5 areas, across those 5 pillars that you saw earlier. One, solution development, which is the key differentiator as a tech company that we bring to develop these types of healthcare or disaster solutions on our cloud. Number 2, to use promotional credits, which is where my team comes in as well. As the social impact arm of AWS, we bring in these credits to offset the cost of using the cloud and to lower the financial barrier of entry. Number 3, events and panels such as this one, cash donations on an exceptional basis, and volunteering. So jumping right into our disaster pillar, many of you are familiar with this. There are many stages of a disaster. We work across the entire life cycle, before disaster in terms of prevention and mitigation, during a disaster, which is the response phase, and after disaster, which is post-recovery aftermath. Specifically for disasters, the 5 ways in which we work through with government and NGOs and multilaterals are, number 1, to really use the power of the cloud to migrate disaster workloads onto the cloud, to develop disaster solutions on the cloud, and then to support those with the disaster credits I mentioned earlier, which help to offset the costs. Number 2, in developing bespoke solutions, one of which I described earlier, the Snowball Edge device, which was used in Ukraine, for example. And these can range from smaller POCs all the way up to large-scale national systems. Number 3, the power of our partnerships. Number 3 and number 4 are the power of our partnerships, both informal and formal. And finally, number 5, the power of data. The power of open data, which is one of the 5 pillars that you saw earlier, which is a horizontal across the other pillars, including disasters. So jumping into the first piece here about credits, just wanted to make a shout out here. I know many of you are from local governments and councils. If you just focus on the first bullet point below, we offer credits to public sector stakeholders such as yourselves who are using these credits to mitigate the impact of disasters, both man-made and natural, but also to respond. So this can be both for preparation for disasters and also for response. And a couple of case studies here, which is where I want to spend most of the time on this session on. Wanted to talk about the recent cyclone in New Zealand, which we responded to. This was, as you can see in the first 2 bullet points, a devastating, catastrophic disaster, 1 in a 200-year event. It also affected parts of Australia, particularly Cyclone Gabrielle, that followed up right after the floods in January 2023. How we supported was that we worked with one of the telcos, Telnet Services, in February this year, to enable the Earthquake Commission of New Zealand. The Earthquake Commission is a government-led initiative which is enabled and supported by Telnet Services, the telco. So we supported Telnet, which in turn supported the Earthquake Commission. We did this by bringing a technology called Amazon Connect, which enabled the call centers and 300+ agents to support the Earthquake Commission by taking these calls, which were overwhelming the call centers across the country. These calls were, of course, from citizens who were directly affected, who are looking for missing family members, who are asking about emergency health services, etc. This technology enables us to scale up and down quickly and immediately. So if you're having a BAU clear weather day, it will run as normal, but in the event of a disaster, it will immediately scale up to take the increased workload of the calls. In this case, triple usage. At the same time, it helps to onboard these new agents who are in these disaster campaigns taking these calls. Besides the Amazon Connect technology, we also deploy Amazon Workspaces, which is used for work from home, to enable the workforce to work from home and respond to disasters, given that it was not safe to go back to work. Telnet CEO at the bottom, as you can see, he quoted the impact of technology on disaster response, but really just encapsulating in one sentence that it wouldn't have been possible to support the number of calls that they were taking if they were using their legacy contact center. So this is just a snapshot. This is just one example of how technology was used. If we pivot now to Sri Lanka, which was a man-made disaster or sort of an unnatural disaster, in this case, a humanitarian crisis where they had a fuel shortage, as well as a water and medical supply and food and food shortage. In this case, fuel, where they had citizens who did not have a system to collect fuel from these depots. They were using a pen and paper analog system. And this is important because in the event of a disaster, you're going to have supply and distribution centers, whether it's for fuel, water, food, etc. And in this case, they were queuing up in 3-kilometer lines under the baking sun to collect fuel manually, without the benefit of any kind of system to track this. So we created a national fuel rationing system, which is a QR-based system that's linked to the citizen's digital ID, as well as the country's fuel reserves. And that really helped to connect the dots between whether the citizen has collected fuel for the day to whether the country still had fuel left to distribute. That reduced the wait time, eliminated fuel hoarding. It helped to streamline delivery and predict the future consumption of demand. In this case, we worked with the government, but also with a customer and a partner to get this system live. So some numbers here, if you just focus on the first one here in the first bullet point, to just give a sense of the scale and the level in which we can support quickly and reliably. You know, we had 5 million people within 14 days on the system, and on the first day alone, 2 million people using the system. As of a month after the system went live, 93% of fuel stations were using this cloud-based fuel rationing system. It's a way of the time, so I'm going a little bit faster. Switching to another disaster here in South Korea. And this is really a case study to talk about business continuity. In this case, education was disrupted because of a flood that hit the center of Seoul, and 60 schools shut down, affecting 200,000 students. This happened on a Friday. Over the weekend, we brought online our entire education system onto the cloud to enable these 200,000 students to go back to school on the Monday that followed. And again, this was done at cost to AWS in the sense that we used credits to support this. So for the last 3 case studies that you saw, as I mentioned, my team comes in to also support this at a social impact level with these credits. I'm going to skip this case study given the time and just talk about a bit more about, you've heard about how we can host national level systems, how we can respond quickly. You've heard a bit about how we do that with the use of credits as well to offset the cost. I want to talk about now specific POCs that we can also build to respond to disasters at a very local level, at a hyper local level, because no 2 disasters are the same. In this case, we'll talk about some devices here that you heard about a bit earlier about the snowball capabilities that we have. If you just focus on the right-hand side, the Snowball Edge device is a suitcase. It's a suitcase size device. You can see the gentleman at the bottom carrying it, and the stats above speak for itself. It's a supercomputer in your hands, which allows you to deploy it in places with no connectivity, no heat, no water. In other words, disaster zones. It helps to salvage data on the go, on the ground, and not only salvage the data, but you can conduct computing workloads on the data in the field. It allows you to do data analytics and different types of use cases, depending on what kinds of applications and technologies you want to be in that Snowball Edge device that you can run. And then when you do restore connectivity, you can then upload all of that into the cloud or into any kind of other database you have, and to create a common operating picture for first responders, government, Red Cross, police, etc. This is another device we have that, if you look at the left-hand side, so first of all, this device can be carried on your back as a backpack. It helps to create a local private 4G network, which is a dedicated 4G network in the event that connectivity has been knocked out. But while in the field, not only can you be connected, but it allows you to also conduct communications and to also conduct intel collection and analysis. So another example we deployed these Snowball Edge devices that you saw, the suitcase devices, was in the Bahamas. We deployed them so that they could on-the-go process drone imagery. So if you can imagine, there are live drones flying to capture aerial imagery of damaged areas. These were immediately uploaded to the Snowball Edge devices on the ground, used by first responders to then assess where were these areas of damage and where they could direct emergency services towards. Just stop me if we're at time, please. We're almost there, but please stop me if we run out of time. Just coming to the close here, another 2 or 3 slides, I think. We have the example of our partnerships. So now we're switching over to, we talked about solutions, we talked about scale, we talked about credits, now we're going to talk about our partnership. This is an example where we partnered with Help.NGO and Humanitarian OpenStreetMap to run mapathons, which is where we can actually get volunteers to come down and map out buildings which have not yet been captured officially by land registry data to see how these buildings have been affected. So this uses publicly available data, whether it's Landsat or Sentinel 1 or 2, to allow volunteers to map. This is just an example again of the power of our partnerships with NGOs. And that's an informal partnership. An example of a formal partnership is here, where we had a partner called Voice Foundry on the second bullet point. It's a partner which has been certified with a disaster competency that we issue to ensure that they actually have the right toolkit for disaster response. So in this case, Voice Foundry actually worked together with our Amazon Connect technology to support the American Red Cross during Hurricane Harvey a few years ago. Very lastly, we want to just talk about the power of data. Open data is a platform that we have, and under the Open Data Sponsorship Program. In short, given the time we have, I'll just summarize it as follows. It is free. It allows anyone, any government, multilateral, NGO, or startup, or even an individual to upload data for free and to download data for free. So we cover the cost of storage and transfer. The criteria for being part of this program is that it has to be data that you make publicly available. It has to be available to the world, and it has to have use, and it has to be useful for the world. I will give you examples of that shortly. So this is useful for disasters in a number of ways, and this is a number of different providers, as you can see, global providers which are on our open data program. And in the region, these are some examples of regional providers, whether it's the Earth Observatory of Singapore or the Japan Space Agency, where they're really providing high-res data, radar data, satellite data for disasters that anyone on Earth can access for free. These are examples of private stakeholders who also have built programs, built technologies such as early earthquake warning systems that can then upload data to our open data program. So if we heard in the first presentation about earthquake prevention, any data that can be uploaded here for free. Again, many of you have heard of Maxar. Again, they are also on our program as well. I think with that, that's the end of the presentation. Thanks so much. I apologize if I went over time. I look forward to taking questions later. Thank you.
Thanks, Ash. Well done, Matt, Michael, Ash. Really appreciate it. And there's a couple of things I think it says. It's really great to be, in New Zealand, Australia, and I think, Ash, are you in Singapore or Philippines?
Right now in the Philippines, going back to Singapore. Yes.
So, COVID and all the challenges, it's certainly accelerated the fact that we're having these sessions like this. So, excellent. Thank you, presenters. Robin, is there any standout questions, or do we want to maybe open it up? We've got about 10 minutes.
Yeah, so there were a couple of questions for Matt in the Q&A section and in the chat, which he's answered. But if you want to speak a little bit more, Matt, to the connectivity and comms side of your solution.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was just in the chat. If anyone hasn't seen that, I'll just briefly touch on it. But Richard asked a good question. What about areas, what kind of technologies used for the connectivity, and what about areas with poor connectivity? And that's something that we hear so many times when we ask people, what do they need in the innovation space? It's always like connectivity. We can't really solve that immediately. We are working with Telstra on that, and I know that they are taking some steps in that space. But for the moment, these use 4G. And we know that that really limits it, but because we're in a pilot phase, we work with councils that do have some connectivity in those areas. When we move into the product phase, we want to use LoRaWAN to deliver some of those images in areas where there isn't any connectivity. The reason why we didn't do that first up is because the more images we get, the smarter we can make the model quicker. And so once we do move into a product phase, we need to compress these images down a little bit more through LoRaWAN rather than cellular to make sure that they can get up to the cloud and do that. So there would be less frequency on the detection, and the images will be smaller. We're confident we can do it, but we just didn't want to bite that off straight away. So in best practice, what we've got currently, images are taken every 15 minutes. And that happens in between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. or less, depending on, sunlight and daylight, which you saw on those screens then. So after sort of 8:15, it's too dark. In a product phase, we want to do 24/7 detection, but we're going to have to leverage some different sensors to do that in that space there as well. So that's the connectivity side of things there.
Yeah, nice. And then one other question for you was asking about access to the same hardware for other councils building building similar use cases. So I guess maybe if you can speak a little bit to sharing across different councils, and maybe that refers to the LGA model or how we can facilitate learning and collaboration between councils.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I guess there's two pieces to this project, really. There's the hardware and the camera network side of things, and we hear that councils, enter these contracts. So say they bought, 5 cameras at $20,000 a piece and they pay $100,000, and then that doesn't have any AI detection on it, so they need to log in and access those images. Now, what happened in Richmond and a few surrounding areas to Carpentaria is those companies decided they didn't want to be in that space anymore. They left the market, and now they can't access any images or access that camera. They also can't reflash that camera back to factory settings and utilize it. So it's dead, just throw it out. So what council's wanting to do now, and any councils that are on the call, I had an email from Cassowary while I was presenting, but basically any councils that do want to set up their own camera network, take more control over that and leverage these cameras. LGAQ is not in the hardware business, but we do partner with Telstra through the LGAQ lab. And that means that we can definitely pass on those specs for those cameras and link you up with those providers. LGAQ is not trying to make money off that because we're just a not-for-profit, and that's why it keeps the costs low. But asset managers have been able to install these cameras and maintain them, so there's not any real risk around that. But really what the LGAQ wants to do is the AI piece. And we've made it so that in a pilot phase, if for whatever reason the LGAQ did exit the market, similar to these other ones, because it's hardware agnostic, we can easily decouple the AI solution from the hardware. So if you were to go and roll out your own camera network, you can still continue to access these images. You just wouldn't get the notifications from that. And that's something we've been really careful about there as well.
Robin.
Okay. Yeah.
But I should probably also add, I think I missed that on my answer there. In terms of councils outside of Queensland, obviously Queensland is our focus. But that doesn't mean we're not happy to do knowledge sharing. That doesn't mean we're not happy to speak to people outside of Queensland, but we do need to service Queensland councils first. If you wanted to find out which cameras we're using, and you're outside of Queensland or you need a contact point, happy to provide you with all that kind of stuff. We're probably not in a space where we can provide the AI solution to councils outside of Queensland at this stage. But if you did want to spitball and start to come up with something like that, obviously there's a fair bit of IP involved, but happy to get on a call and talk more about it.
Collaboration. I'll just say that, Matt, certainly I'm here in AWS, but certainly have a personal I guess mission to be the collaborator in this space and working with all yourselves and others. So I think there's kind of a non-negotiable across governments and public-private sector that we've all got to work together on disaster resilience, Matt, but accepting that there's some commercial realities that we need to deal with as well. But thank you. Any other questions before we look to wrap up?
No, but I will just mention that there was a comment on sensors and data points that I used, and that was directed at Michael and the Christchurch City Council, and Michael's responded with a link to a blog post on the approach taken compared to traditional seismic monitoring, and that is in the chat as well.
We're next steps. First of all, again, thank you to everyone who's taken an hour out of their busy week. We will be following up with all of you with just probably some clarification of some of the answers to the questions, an opportunity to link to this recording and some of the presentations if presenters are willing to share. And then really for me it's the next step. So Robin, we've got things planned, but I've put in there in the slide, we've got some ideas for the next sessions like this. And we hope to build these webinars around smart cities in action. But if you have any ideas across that kind of smart cities for public sector and for public good spectrum, we'd love to have your ideas. And there's an email address there for smart cities. You got that date in there. Smart cities comes to Auckland, Robin.
Yes, correct. So 6th of July, we'll be heading to Auckland. And as Anthony said, we'll be sharing the recording and all the links to different presenters. So you can reach out with any further questions as well.
Look, thank you, everyone. And I guess there's any last comments maybe from the panel, because you've given your time, not only the hour, but the preparation, and we're all around kind of the Asia Pacific. So any last comments to close us off? We've got maybe a minute each if you've got anything.
I'll kick it off. I suppose we've talked a lot about collaboration, and you can't stress that too much. So whether that's within your region or further afield, just utilize the resources around you, and there's no point reinventing the wheel. And we find working with tertiary educators is a great way to expand around machine learning and AI use cases. To Matt's kind of examples, it's a great way to push the boundaries and support educators and people learning as well.
My comments are to just want to reiterate my thanks to Anthony, AWS, and Smart Cities Council for their support. I mean, they picked this up and what we're doing from really early days and championed it and shared the excitement and really helped us amplify it, but also around the security standpoint, but also the technology in AWS. I mentioned Freddie's on the call. Freddie pretty much wants to marry AWS. He'll leave his family and marry AWS. And that's because it's so flexible, and it really allows us to do what we need to do, and we couldn't do it. We couldn't make this project a reality without that. So that would be my my ending comments.
That's our sponsored ad from Matt.
I was not asked to say that, just
No,
FYI,
definitely.
but Freddie would kill me if I didn't.
All right, Ash, the AWS speaker, your last words.
Just want to end with a call to action, really. I mean, this is really great to see for the fellow panel, but also the participants and the kind of questions that come out. And really want to take this further to how we can actually collaborate and address these disasters, not just during the response stage, but how can we mitigate? We know they're going to happen at any given time of the month or year. So how can we do to mitigate the impact of that? And that's the preparedness phase. So I'm not sure what the exact next steps would be, but happy to leave our contact details and share the materials as well offline if that's helpful. And just look forward to further collaboration. Thank you.
Thanks, Ash. And Robin, if you just got the last slide, it'll leave everyone with our contact details, I think, going back to thanks to our supporters, as you can see there, and Mike and the ALGAM team. I know we have a lot of New Zealand councils represented on the call today, which is fantastic. And having spent 17 years there and have 2 Kiwi kids, I am connected, believe me. So everyone, thank you. I think we're well on time. Robin, I'll hand it back to you, and look, thank you for organizing all this. And I see that we've got a lot of ratings in the chat, so we'll take some learnings from this.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Anthony. And thank you to our presenters. We'll be sharing a recording. We'll probably share most of the questions, but if you do have any questions you'd like to add, do share them along, and we can work with our panelists to answer those and share them with the rest of the audience as well. We look forward to seeing you in Auckland and in our next webinar. Thanks you so
everyone.
much.
Bye-bye.